And welcome back into Sports Talk. Smitty sitting in for Phil Kornblut and Chris Bergen. But, as I said, just because Phil Kornblut's in his golf spikes doesn't mean we don't have the Seawells recruiting report, and we do. Don't forget to visit Seawells here in Columbia every time. If you are, they're actually closed this week, but we want to just remind you, we thank Seawells for sponsoring the recruiting report load these many years. And, of course, they are an anchor, a pillar here in the Columbia community. And if you are driving through from out of town, be sure to go by and take in Seawells whenever you get the opportunity. All right, recruiting report. Clemson came up short today in the recruiting battle for offensive tackle Hardy Watts of Brookline, Massachusetts. The Tigers were up against a pair of Big Ten programs in Wisconsin and Michigan. Watts chose the Badgers. Now, of course, Wisconsin, elite in terms of offensive line play historically. They love to run the football there in Madison, Wisconsin. So Watt's decision leaves the Tigers with 3 committed offensive linemen for the 2025 class. The Tigers also missed on wide receiver Cortez Mills of Homestead, Florida. He committed to Oklahoma, the newly minted SEC Oklahoma Sooners. Cortez Mills chose Oklahoma over Florida, LSU, and Nebraska. Clemson this weekend missed on a top cornerback target when Gregory Thomas of Plantation, Florida, announced for Florida State. This recruiting battle had long been between the Tigers and the Seminoles. Those were his only 2 official visits in June. He also visited earlier in the year. Florida State had 2 major connections to Thomas. First, his former high school coach, Patrick Surtain Sr., is now the secondary coach at FSU, and secondly, he is a member of the Seminole tribe of Florida and will be the first from his community to suit up for the Seminoles. That's a cool story. Even if you're a Clemson fan that's a little chafed that you didn't get Gregory Thomas, kind of cool that a Seminole is going to play for the Seminoles. The Tigers have 1 corner back committed in Grayson Littleton. Others they have offered who have committed elsewhere include Donovan Starr to Auburn, Blake Woodby to Ohio State, Dallas Golden, who chose Notre Dame. And JP's cheering over there, Notre Dame Irish fan. Dylan Lewis to Tennessee, and Mark Manfred to Mizzou. So Clemson just coming up a little bit short in the recruiting battles for those cornerbacks. It's really interesting, really interesting. We're going to have to dig into this. We will do that. We'll get a Clemson recruiting expert, someone who's been tracking all of these targets every step of the way, from evaluation to offer to decision. And we're going to talk about Clemson recruiting and where they stand. We may even take a look at the 24/7 recruiting rankings. We would never do that. Never do that if Phil Kornblut is within earshot. But we might just glance, just for context. Another Clemson receiver target, Samari Reed of Coconut Creek, Florida, will announce Wednesday. He has Clemson, Kentucky, Penn State, Ole Miss, and West Virginia as his finalist. Not all the news has been bad for the Tigers. Clemson recruiting expert Paul Strelo, I know Paul. We worked together at the Spartanburg Herald-Journal some years ago. He's an outstanding writer. Much respect for Paul. He works now for TigerIllustrated.com. Paul gave a projection Monday morning of 2026 quarterback Tate Reynolds out of Queen Creek, Arizona, and Strelo believes Reynolds will choose the Tigers. Reynolds last week decommitted from Arizona State for baseball. He attended one of Dabo Swinney's camps in June, picked up an offer from quarterbacks coach Garrett Riley following his performance. The next South Carolina target to come off the board will be safety Jaden Blair of Winston-Salem. He is set to announce at 3 o'clock Friday from a list made up of South Carolina, Michigan, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Louisville. Gamecocks target defensive tackle Bryce Jenkins of Washington, D.C. has set Saturday for his commitment announcement. He also has Tennessee, Maryland, and Rutgers on his short list. Jenkins made official visits to all 4 of his finalists. Jenkins is a former teammate of Gamecocks freshman defensive end Dylan Stewart. They played at Friendship Collegiate Academy together in the nation's capital. The founder of that program, Azair Abdul-Rahim, is now an assistant with the Terrapins. Last month, Clemson offered 2026 wide receiver Connor Salmon of Purcellville, Virginia. Salmon is one of the fastest prospects in Virginia as a state track champion and a 10.4 time in the 100 meters. Last season, He caught 53 passes for 16 touchdowns and averaged over 20 yards per catch. His offers include Virginia, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Florida State, LSU, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Penn State, and North Carolina. And one baseball note we want to pass along. California Baptist transfer shortstop Josh Pano committed to Clemson last season. Pano batted .296 with 11 dingers and 38 RBIs. He committed 7 errors with a fielding percentage of .974. And I'm sorry, two baseball notes. Outfielder Dylan Harrison of Fontaine, California committed to Clemson for the 2025 class. So a little good news for Clemson baseball and Eric Bakich among missing on some of those football targets. We'll talk more baseball. You seam heads ought to be loving this. We've got a lot of baseball coming up in hour number 2. Jim Toman with Toman's Tidbits, and we're talking Braves at the bottom of hour number 2 with Bill Shanks. Be sure to stay with us. You're listening to the Sports Talk Media Network.